You're listening to an ongoing discussion on life, leadership, and ministry. This is the Bryan Sams Podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Bryan Sams Podcast. I am certain at this moment that you have just been almost beside yourself, watching social media, catching emails, and knowing that there was going to be a big announcement here today on the podcast. And I am here to bring you the exciting changes coming to the Bryan Sams Podcast. So welcome, everybody. And on today's episode, I have, of course, my long-term Bryan Sams Podcast co-host, Aaron Chan. Aaron, welcome to the Bryan Sams Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, my goodness. Aaron Chan. I mean, you're getting ready to plant a church.
Oh, yes.
In fact, you are kind of already, kind of doing it.
Things are rolling right now. Yeah, we had 15 people this past Sunday.
Yeah, 15 people.
Yeah.
15 people in church, and the church is off and running. That's before really even an official launch. So I'm excited for Aaron. They're at the Hope Church in Mayport, Florida, just outside of the base. If you're interested in helping Aaron in any way, we got a mission team coming in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We got some people supporting financially. Shout out to anybody that's going to be at Idea Summit in January. Aaron's going to be a presenter there.
Yep.
And
looking forward to it.
He's got a young family. He's got a baby that needs formula and diapers. Any and all help would be good.
Oh, yes. She needs Jesus, right?
And she needs, for sure, Jesus. Well, Aaron, I'm glad to have you. And we also are joined today by Luke Clayton of Must Increase Media. Luke, welcome to Bryan Sams Podcast.
Hey, it's good to be back. It's been a few months, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here, and I know your episodes were a blessing this summer when I was out on sabbatical, and I know that you've had a lot of communication with some people since, which is a blessing. Of course, Luke is our regular partner and supporter of the Bryan Sams Podcast, and so you hear a lot about Must Increase Media, and I cannot say enough good things about what they're doing. Our church uses them. And now, of course, the Bryan Sams Podcast is going full all in partnership with Must Increase Media. And that is actually what this episode is all about. And I said how excited I am, but I got to tell you, I'm sitting here with a metaphorical box of tissues right here. Because today's episode, we got something very exciting that we're going to announce about the future of the podcast. But we're also singing a little swan song because this is Aaron Chan's official final episode as the Bryan Sams Podcast co-host.
Oh, the emotions are welling up. My goodness. It has been a journey.
Oh, my. Oh, what episode is this? This is like 70 or something?
65? 60, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, we're going to go with 65. And I think it's not, but we're going to go with it because we're not looking at it right now. But Aaron, tell me what have been a couple of your favorite moments on the Bryan Sams Podcast?
I think without a doubt, the one that stands out the most is the series we did on the King James only debate. And that was, man, I think that's still the highest grossing number of downloads that we've had.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just interesting, especially when we interviewed the final guy. Remember, was it Wallace something?
Oh, yeah, the guy.
Yeah, that stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, Brother Wallace. Yeah, he was a King James only guy.
Yes,
who came on.
Great conversation, and I think we might have changed people's minds on it. I think.
Oh, I think informing for sure, maybe opening up a new perspective. And I don't know, Luke, you may have a comment here. I think that series of conversations changed the whole direction.
It was definitely a turning point.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the downloads increased, then the regular, subscribers increased. Go ahead. Somebody was going to say something.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, since I've gotten familiar with the podcast data over the past few weeks, I kind of went back and tracked, and yeah, for sure. I think the one you're talking about with Wallace is the number one downloaded episode, I think. And then any of the other ones that cover that issue, they all have crazy high downloads. And so, yeah, it really did. And from there on out, it's kind of like, up and to the right in terms of, downloads and listens and all that stuff. So definitely a game-changing moment.
I like it. And I think what it did was it showed me something, which is kind of a transition thing for us, but it showed me the need to stay right out there, pushing and leaning in on these issues related to advancing fellowship and cooperation among good churches. And so Aaron, that was a highlight moment, but I know a lot's changing in your life, obviously, and just give us a little highlight about what's been going on and what you're heading to, and sign off for us, man.
Absolutely.
Give us like your greatest piece of Bryan Sam's podcast. Speech.
Well, for those of you that don't know, I think in 10 years I'm going to look back on this and go, what were you thinking? This is all three things going on in my life right now that has just made my life kind of crazy right now. So number one is that we're replanting a church, raising money for it, meeting with people, trying to figure out a strategy for outreach and all that. So that's happening right now. We just had a baby. She turned 1 month old as of this recording a few days ago. And she's got a good set of lungs, I'll say that. So she's 1 month old. So we've been dealing with that. And then I'm also in seminary right now, taking a full load this fall. So you've got classes, you've got the new baby, you've got a church replant and all this transition going on. I'm just thinking, what have I got myself into? But it's been awesome. We're having a blast, and I'm looking forward to what God has in store for us the next few months and years. I think it's been great. I've really enjoyed being a part of the podcast, and Lord willing, maybe you'll have me on occasionally here and there, but it's been a wonderful experience, and it's been a learning experience. I've learned a lot about the technology stuff. I've learned a lot about speaking on the fly for sure, and not one of my strengths, to be sure. But it's been a wonderful. How many years have we been?
It's been over 2 years, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard to believe we've been doing that long. It doesn't seem like I've said to you this before. It feels like I just got to Jacksonville, and at the same time, it feels like I've been here forever. And it kind of still feels that way. But it's been a wonderful experience. To anybody who is wanting to connect with me, I'm sure we'll have my email address in the show notes. But for those of you that have reached out to me before on previous episodes about things that I've spoken about, church finances, administration, things like that, thank you for your messages. I look forward to hearing from you. If you need anything, my metaphorical door is always open. And thanks for having me on.
We got lots of metaphors going on. We got a tissue.
Oh, yeah.
We got a tissue box here. We have a door right over here that Aaron just opened up for you. And Aaron's done a great job. I think Aaron provides a side of humor and more level head clarity on a few things. Me, I'm just kind of like wild. I'm just going to shoot at it and hope, it doesn't matter what really it hits. My philosophy is more shotgun oriented. I'm going to shoot it at the hole and something's probably going to hit and, you'll know. But in all seriousness, Aaron and I have a long history of, first of all, friendship, but also partnership here. That partnership continues. Like River City Baptist and Hope Church are really one. And so in every sense of the word, his office, his philosophy, shared resources, all those things are happening. So we are in partnership. I just felt like with all the changes, I wanted to take as much off of Aaron's plate as possible so that he could focus on his family and this brand new church. And so I'm thrilled about it. He will be on here more, but as officially a co-host, he is today. I mean, I just got this picture of just this handing a mantle over, or the old handing over the shepherd's staff, and you're handing it to Luke today.
Hey, Luke is more than capable.
Oh, absolutely. So Luke. Luke, welcome to the Bryan Sam's podcast. And you are, as of right now, right? I mean, just literally just now, Luke Clayton of Must Increase is the official partner and co-host of the Bryan Sams podcast. So welcome, Luke. You got any word for Aaron before we get this party started?
Well, I mean, I'm to continue with the metaphors. I'm taking that metaphorical shepherd staff there now, and yeah, I'm already feeling the great weight. But Aaron has done a tremendous job, and no, as the new co-host, producer, whatever, I am not going to let Aaron go away for good. Like, we're going to get him back on here from time to time, in the future, and because we want to know what's going on with Hope Church and everything, and we got to just keep some of that Chan personality mixed in, and so it's big shoes to fill. I'm honored to fill them, and I am looking forward to the future of the podcast.
It's going to be great. In fact, that's kind of the whole purpose today. We did some fun stuff, but we want to tell you about basically kind of what's happening coming up. Today is the last official formatted episode as we have been doing up to this point, 2 years. Starting next week, we'll be on a new schedule leading us to a brand new launch of something special in January of 2023. So first of all, let me make the first big announcement, and that is this, that as of right now, the Bryan Sams podcast is going to a weekly episode release.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world?
Just doubled his workload.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I hope somehow that we are going to streamline the workload, but next week, so 1 week from today on November 21st, we will release the first on the new schedule, which is going to be an epic episode with Ken Baker on pastoring through tough seasons. And then we will be off and running on a once a week release of an episode. So that's the first big change. I have had, Luke, many people say to me in the past, the thing they like the least about the podcast is that it only runs open once every other week. So talk about just real quick, maybe some thoughts behind it, some reasons why this is a good move for us.
Yeah, well, again, looking at the numbers, all the data of how well the podcast is doing, how much it's grown, downloads and all of that. That was kind of the first logical conclusion I came to was, okay, if we're going to take this to the next level, let's get weekly episodes out there. And so you and I, we kind of strategized about that and talked about a way, yeah, sure, more episodes does mean a little bit more workload, but at the same time, like you said, we kind of talked through how we can streamline that and actually make that doable. And so, and the most popular release schedule for a podcast is weekly. If you go and, check out other popular podcasts, some do, the every other week or once a month even. There's crazy people out there who do daily podcasts. But the weekly podcast format seems to be the most popular. And so, we're just gonna go for it. And like you said, starting, really, I guess this week, but next week, you can expect a weekly episode every Monday, I believe, is what we're planning on from now until Jesus comes.
Okay, guys, the second thing I'm super excited about the podcast is we're actually going to change the name and the identity of the podcast. Starting in January of 2023, the Bryan Sams podcast will be changed to the Church Advance podcast with Bryan Sams. So that is exciting news. And you may say, well, is that just a name or is that a real change with real substance? And I would say absolutely. The Bryan Sams podcast was kind of more general. It was an ongoing discussion of life, leadership, and ministry. And of course, elements of that are going to continue. But as we discussed with the King James issue, we sort of found ourselves dialed in to not just a discussion, but also being involved in a bit of a reformation. And that's what Church Advance really did. In fact, we held the conference back in February. And I know, Luke, you and I even talked at the conference. I mean, it was almost like God's obviously doing something here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the conference was I remember you invited me to the conference, and I'm just gonna be honest, I'm not a big conference guy. And so I was kind of like, yeah, okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. It truly is. I've been to a lot of different conferences over the years, representing my business and things like that. It's unlike any other conference I'd ever been to. It was just a bunch of pastors, church leaders, men that are they're authentic, and they're there just to learn, to grow. And what's beautiful about it, and I think that's what makes Church Advance as a movement, if you will, or a brand or whatever you want to call it, is that everybody doesn't have to agree. You don't have to line up exactly. In fact, to some extent, the discussion of deferring opinions seemed encouraged and welcomed. And so, yeah, that was what was awesome about the conference. And yeah, while we were there, we talked more about it. It was like this. I think you said it. It's like this is kind of the future, if you will, of your ministry to other pastors and churches. And so that again kind of is the driving force behind us changing the name and officially saying, well, let's make the podcast about Church Advance.
Yes. And so Church Advance, and you can see this on our website, but it's about a reformation. It's about guys, pastors, ministry leaders who have been wedged into one area of thought, of theological persuasion. And I don't mean like core doctrine. I'm talking about outside things. And to where this was the only way that things could be done, and you had to line up exactly perfectly in every area. And I just saw a clip from the last Southern Baptist Convention where Albert Mohler took the mic, and he made this statement. He basically said, if everything has to be detailed out in our doctrinal statement, everything, and that's what everybody wants. Make a statement about critical race theory. Make a statement about this. Make a statement about this. Make a statement about this. He said, we will self-destruct, because the beauty of something like a convention or a fellowship is not uniformity exactly, it's unity. And guys, there are obviously things in the Bible that just aren't as clear as other things. There are things that matter more, if you will. Jesus even said there are things that are weightier matters of the law. So what we are doing is we are encouraging a reformation of fellowship, partnership, and hope among people who believe the gospel, but are done with some of the legalism, some of the formality, some of the extra biblical expectations. And so what we do in the conference, and now, of course, on the podcast, we are focusing on issues, theological issues, practical issues, ministry-related issues that allow some thinking outside of the box and trying to give a voice so that other churches, other leaders, other pastors can experience the same reformation that we've experienced and find a place where there are other guys going through the same kind of thing. And so there is a reformation, Luke. I mean, my goodness, I'm looking at you. I don't know how old you are exactly, but I mean, would you not agree that guys my age, I'm 44 and under, and even some older than me, are not we going through a bit of a reformation? Right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, guys my age, I'm 31. And so I know a lot of guys my age, and I think we talked about this some, that they're in my kind of share a story like mine, and that it's like, well, we kind of came up through a certain type of church, the independent Baptist church, if you will. We went to the Bible colleges that, aligned with that. We were kind of given this formula to follow in terms of here's a pattern. And then now after that, now you go into ministry and serve the church full time, and nothing wrong with that. I know guys who it's like, that's worked for them long term, but then there's a lot of guys like me to where maybe that hasn't, the pattern hasn't played out exactly how we were maybe promised that it would. And so I don't know, I found, and that's kind of been a big part of the heart of what you're doing there with, church revitalization projects and helping guys who maybe have been, younger guys who've been burnt out, for lack of better terms, in ministry, to get back in ministry and rediscover, like you said, and experience that reformation of, hey, here's what the church is really all about. Here's what the gospel is really all about. It's not about following, this exact, like you said, pattern or pipeline or whatnot. It's about about Jesus Christ. It's about the gospel. And so that again has just been again one of those things, like I said, about the conference and about Church Advance in general, that for a guy like me is just so encouraging. And so yeah, it's a reformation, and a really healthy, positive one at that.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to just have the podcast and the conference that kind of gears guys that way. We're expecting a great crowd again this year in February. Now, what's going to be different about the podcast, or what should you expect? Obviously, we will go back into some content and unpack some things in a greater way, deeper dive, whether it's theological or practical. Obviously, we're creating an entire slate of brand new topics, brand new content that's never been discussed on the podcast. And of course, we're going to continue to have conversations with pastors, ministry leaders, and other guests. So I'm looking forward to inviting some new faces, I even envision us in the next year expanding out and really having some guests that maybe just aren't as common in kind of our world. And I'm looking forward to that. We're also going to be looking forward for the rest of this year into a little bit of discussion about the conference itself. And so, Luke, why don't you talk about what we're going to be doing for the rest of the calendar year until we start the official launch of the new podcast name in 2023?
Yeah, so the focus of, just so we can start, our listeners that can start to maybe get more of the heartbeat of what Church Advance is all about and what it's becoming. We are going to be releasing like I said, the weekly episodes from here to the end of the year, with the exception of the last episode of the year will follow tradition. It'll be your best books of the year. We're going to definitely do that one. But all the ones in between now and then is going to be something that's content featured from a past Church Advance event. So the conference is kind of the big one, but we've also done a couple of Church Advance virtual events. And so that's what you can expect next week, like you already talked about, part of a virtual event that featured Ken Baker. He's got a really powerful story about a season he went through, a really tough season. So we're going to be sharing that. Then the following week, we've got Practical Shepherding with Bryan Croft. Again, same part of that same Church Advance virtual. And then from there, we're going to actually be revisiting some of the portions of the sermons preached at Church Advance 2022 with H.B. Charles, Kurt Skelly, Carrie Schmidt. And so we're going to, and then in each of those episodes, we're going to kind of give a little bit of like, it's a quick preview of, if you will, of like, hey, here's what you can expect at the conference and things, and then, give you a little sample of those sermons. And so that is the content you can expect from now into the end of the year. And then, of course, that Best Books episode is going to be releasing as the final official episode, if you will, of the Bryan Sams podcast, and the final episode of 2022. And then, first Monday of January, we are hitting it wide open. Church Advance of Bryan Sams, all new content coming your way.
That's awesome. And then, of course, we're also going to open up a YouTube channel in 2023. So if you're more into YouTube than the audio, we're going to have that for you. New episodes released every Monday, effective immediately.
Boom.
And man, I'm super excited about getting to my annual Best Books episode. I've read a ton of books this year, particularly on my sabbatical and other things. And I think that you guys are going to find it refreshing. It's going to be exciting. And I want to go ahead. I know this is a little premature, but I do want to go ahead. We'll make this live on Eventbrite also. But I was going to do this next week, but I'm going to plan on going ahead and having an exclusive discount for all of our podcast listeners for the Church Advance 2023 conference, February 8th through 10th here in Jacksonville, Florida. At checkout, add the code podcast for an exclusive discount for your registration fee and for all those that you bring with you. There's only 300 seats available for sale, and so we want to encourage you to get right on that. So use the code podcast at checkout to go ahead and get registered for this year's Church Advance Conference. Well, Luke, first of all, thank you for joining me today, and secondly, officially welcome to the Bryan Sams podcast.
It's good to be here. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a great journey.
And we're looking forward to more conversational life, leadership, and ministry. Until next time, God bless you guys. Have a great day.